Hello Internet, this is Daniel with Driving and Dragons. Today I'm actually doing a little bit of a reshoot. I shot this topic a few days ago. I was really ticked off at the time, so I think I came across a little bit more hostile than I'd really like to, and a little bit less fair. But what I'm going to talk about is what I believe to be the most toxic prevailing trend in tabletop role-playing games right now, at least in terms of the community, and how it needs to kind of regress back to where it came from, because like a lot of bad things and a lot of just cancerous things that happen in different hobbies, it didn't start from a bad place. It started from a good place, and it just kind of spiraled out of control. So I'll talk to you about it on the other side. Looking forward to seeing you stick around. So what is this toxic, cancerous growth that has come up in the tabletop role-playing game community? The best way I can describe it is player entitlement. And it's not just player entitlement like all the players are entitled. It is a prevailing sense of entitled players in the gaming community. And it goes through the whole thing. You have game masters that encourage this. You have game masters that will go out there and tell you that if you are not catering to these to your entitled players, then you are not a good GM. And it really seriously needs to go away. This is an outgrowth of player agency. All right, this is an outgrowth of the obsession with player agency that has come about in, I think, maybe the last 5 years. These days, we started off saying, hey, look, don't railroad your players, make a good story, allow them to feel like they live in the world, that they're not just, on a track being moved from scene to scene to scene. They need to be able to make decisions, and their decisions need to matter. We used to call it burying the hook, which is a fishing term. When you bury your hook in fishing, that means that you set the hook too late, and it's usually after the fish is more or less swallowed the bait. So you're hooking them down in the throat instead of hooking their lip. But when we said bury the hook, it was your character hooks that get your players to move along with the storyline. They shouldn't really recognize that they've been hooked until it's a little bit too late, because you want them to feel like their decisions matter, and you maybe set some character hooks to get them to go in one direction or another, but you don't want to just dangle it in front of them and say, here's your hook, take the bait, the adventure is this way. You want them to feel more like what they've done matter. There is nothing wrong with that. Same thing when it comes to the way they play their character, the way they select their feats, and select their skills, or select their abilities. If you have a player who comes up with some out-of-the-box ways to use abilities, or a crazy way to build a character, let them. As long as it's not game-breaking, as long as they're not asking for a bunch of special rules and stuff, let them. And if you have a player who comes forward and says, hey, I'm really looking for such and such magic item, I'm really trying to help to find this thing because I think this would be cool for my character, it's something I'd like to have, as long as it's, once again, not unreasonable. Maybe you should try to put something in there, like if a character has been trying to move in a certain direction, maybe put an item in that would be beneficial to the way they want to play that character. All of that's fine. That's all just good game master behavior that helps everybody at the table have fun. But what it's developed into is an idea of, if you have any restrictions whatsoever on characters at your table, you're a bad GM. How dare you say that they can't go through 14 different source books and make a hodgepodge 4-race character with dragon blood and werewolf blood and vampire blood and elf blood, and it was also an Azamar, but it's not just an Azamar born from an angel, it's an Azamar born from a fallen angel, so it also has some traits from devils and demons too, but not really bad devils and demons. And then you also want to have fox magic, and you want to have this over here, that over there. And by the way, I need to start with this list of items. Yeah, I need to make sure that I have these items by the time I'm level 5. Otherwise, it doesn't complete my character. And if you don't give me those 5 items, or at least give me a clear chance to get those 5 items, you're interfering with my fun. You're robbing my player agency. This crap has got to stop. It has got to stop. I literally saw in a thread, a guy comes up and he says, look, I'm a game master. I have a vampire who is a vampire lord who's an enemy in our campaign, and he has selected a player as somebody he wants to turn and make into a vampire. And I need to know about, and he was asking about other rules, like the way necrotic damage works in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and because this character has the ability to summon some undead monsters that do some strength drain that, depending on how you're playing, it may or may not affect a vampire. Point is, his rules question doesn't matter. What matters is the way he set it up and how he put it out there. Because while you had some people who popped in and said, here's why I think this should be ruled this way, here's why I think this should be ruled that way, here's how you should handle your necrotic damage situation or whatever, you get some people, one in particular that sticks out in my head, but he's not alone, and he was actually a lot better about this than I've seen a lot of people be. Because, number one, if you had a discussion with your player about whether they want their character to be a vampire, if they don't want their character to be turned to vampire, then stop. Stop right there. It shouldn't happen. What? You've moved from player agency, where a player gets to decide what they want for their character, into the player having an NPC agency. You know what? My character really doesn't want to get hit in the face with an axe. So should my DM not roll any attacks from the orcs? My guy wants to be super rich and wealthy, so should the ATM just spit out euro for me? Should I just get eddies everywhere in my cyberpunk game because I want to be rich? This is the most ridiculous thing I've seen. This kind of crap is the most ridiculous thing out there, because it's like, yes, the bad guy is doing something to your character that you don't want to have happen to your character. Now, you shouldn't make it impossible for them to stop. You shouldn't put it into some situation where there's no way they get a roll or a save or a way to reverse the process or anything like that. I'm not saying that you should just say, I've decided your character is going to be a vampire whether you like it or not, and you can either roll a new character, or you can play this vampire, and that's your two choices. Or, hey, you're stuck playing this vampire until the end of this campaign. I'm not saying that. You should have some chances to defend yourself, some ways to get out of it, if you want to keep that particular character. Or you should have the ability to hand your character sheet over to the DM and say, I'm going to be another character now. But to sit there and suggest that you should not have your NPC villain do something NPC villainish because the character wouldn't like it is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And what's worse is that this is pervasive in the culture, because that same person would say, if he had come in and he said, hey, he turned my character into a vampire and I didn't want him to, that DM would be getting roasted up and down, one side, by half of these guys. What a bad game master. I can't believe they did that. They totally took away your agency. How dare they ruin your character as if it's not a game and you can't just take your character sheet to a different table and play it again. As if it's really gone forever and there's some great mystic role-playing game Jesus that comes down and says, no, my son, you played that character in some other game at some other table and they died. Give me this character sheet. You don't get to play them again. That doesn't happen. And what it does by having this obsession with player agency is you have a game master who sits there always on edge that they're going to say no to the wrong thing. They get afraid to say no, and your players just run amok and make a crap game because everybody's running off, getting all this special treatment and stuff. And when everybody is special, nobody's special. When everybody gets what they want, they don't. It's like that episode of The Twilight Zone where the guy goes to hell and he thinks he's in heaven because everything goes his way, but then he turns around and realizes that his life is utterly boring and miserable because it always goes in his favor. And then your group falls apart. That is not how to be a good game master. And what it does worse than anything, it leads to a lot of GM fatigue. And that is where you get into somebody like me, who's been game master for years, always running different groups, deals with these kind of players, and it's like, you know what, I'm just going to go fishing. I'm just going to go fishing instead. I don't want to play Gamble World. I don't want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't want to play Top Secret. I don't want to play Cyberpunk. I'm going to play Go Fishing instead, by myself, where there's no players who can sit there and holler about how I took away that bass's agency by putting a hook in his mouth. And it leads to that game master fatigue, and it encourages people to not be game masters. It runs off new game masters because who wants to be the whipping boy for the table? Game masters, you have to remember that you're there to have fun too. And if entitled players are making it to where you're not having fun, then that needs to be addressed. And players, you got to let this go. You don't get to have everything, and you don't have to always get what you want. The game doesn't always break your way. There's no participation trophy. Not everybody gets to be a winner. Sometimes the dice kill you. Sometimes you get turned into a vampire, or a werewolf, or a sludge, or a slime, or a wraith, or a wight, or a cyber psycho. And it happens. And that's not taking away your agency. That's not ruining your character. That's just the way these games are played, and that's the way they have to be played for everybody to have fun. My suggestion is, if your obsession is with always getting what you want, you just need to hire a professional game master and tell that professional, all right, we're paying you $20 a session apiece to run the game for us, and here's all the exact stuff we want and exactly what we want to have allowed and not allowed. So that he can be having fun getting money, and you can be fun having your game. You don't do this to your friends. And it really needs to stop. It needs to stop big time in your Reddit threads, in your Facebook forums, all that. In the game master advice areas. It needs to go away in a big way, because all you're doing is teaching a whole group of players that they don't want to be game masters, and teaching a whole bunch of game masters that they don't want to be game masters anymore either. And then ain't nobody going to have a game master. It is time to reel back character entitlement. Your player agency means you are allowed to make decisions for your character as the decisions of the character. I've decided to train in magic and multi-class as a wizard. I've decided I want to focus on handguns and not long guns. I've decided that I want to remain pure and not become a vampire. But that's it. That's where their agency stops. Because guess what? That's not how the world works, and that's not how the game world works. I've decided that I want to be a millionaire. But I still have to go out and do it, and there's a lot of people who've decided that they don't want me to get that money. That's how the world works. I've decided that I want to go pick a bar fight and beat this guy up. And he's decided that he doesn't want to get beat up. And one of us is going to be right. One of us is going to lose our agency. This has got to stop. All right. So that's my rant on this just extremely toxic environment of player entitlement. You're entitled to make decisions for your character. You are not entitled to make decisions about the effects of other things in the world. You are not entitled to dictate how monsters behave, how NPCs behave, how events happen, or whether or not it has a negative impact on your character, because negative impacts happen. You know what? I decided I didn't want to wreck my car, and I got T-boned by an 18-wheeler, and guess what? That's all there is to it. That's just how life works. So keep that in mind. Keep it in mind as a player. Keep it in mind when you're giving advice. Keep it in mind as a game master that you are there to have fun too, and that this entitled player syndrome, when you see that advice, the second you get advice about whether or not something should happen, and it starts off with, have you sat down and discussed with the player what your bad guy wants to do? You stop reading that advice right there. Just immediately, whatever comes after it, no good. Because, I didn't want my house to get robbed, but a burglar decided to break into it anyway, because he's a burglar. You don't go up to your player and say, hey, this burglar character, this bad guy I've got is thinking of breaking in and stealing your magic item. Are you okay with him stealing your magic item? Because otherwise he'll just break in and steal a lamp and a couple of plates. By the way, you want to keep that lock, right? So I'll make sure that he picks the lock instead of just breaks in, even though he really doesn't have the ability to pick your awesome lock. I wouldn't want you to lose your awesome lock when you don't want to. Stop it. But anyway, that's rant over on that one. Go on down there and tell me how I'm ruining the game by suggesting that players not have 100% complete control over everything that happens to their characters. Just tell me what you think in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.